Okay, hi guys. So we are here in our family hearth room, that's what we call it, our living room. I'm Madison Toll, I'm the executive director of Mite, and I am here with
Georgia Scott Toll, Abigail Toll,
and our mom, Tamsin Toll, is behind the camera. And these ladies are joining me for a debrief on a project that I just came home from for Mite. So it was Project 56, Empower Women Kenya. And so the project had to do with menstrual hygiene and education. So I thought, who better to sit down with than a group of women who have all had a period. This is going to be a very, very open, natural conversation. As you guys can see, we're sitting with our socks on, if you're watching this on video, drinking coffee or tea. So it's going to be pretty open, real and raw.
Oh.
And there our robot vacuums go. Okay, before we start this podcast, I wanted to give a quick content warning. In this episode, we are going to be talking about the topics of sex, rape, and menstrual health and education. So, to give you guys an idea of what the project was, Project 56, and what our donors supported, it was based in Mount Elgon, Kenya. We worked with an organization called Days for Girls, and they do menstrual health education and hygiene around the world. So they work to destigmatize cultures who have basically created these myths surrounding periods and how they are bad or unclean. And then they also provide sustainable washable pads for women and girls around the world. And so our donors help support a project in Mount Elgon, Kenya with them. And this is our third time working with Days for Girls. We worked with them in Nepal and we worked with them in Malawi, but this is our first time with them in Kenya. Yeah, you guys know from this project, you guys know what period poverty is now, but had you guys heard of it before then?
I heard about it when we first partnered with Days for Girls 2 years ago. Same. Before that, I didn't know what it was.
Do you guys want to explain it? Really give your idea of what it is?
My understanding is that period poverty is when women lack the necessary tools to handle their period, their menstrual cycle, and so they end up missing school and work, which leads them into a life of poverty. Because education and the ability to make money is essential to living life.
That's right.
Period.
So, exactly. So yes, that is what period poverty is. I did not know about it. I don't think anybody on our team knew about it, including our project director, Melanita, before we knew about Days for Girls. Because the interesting thing is, and we can now kind of get into, now that we know what the project was and everything, we can kind of get into the struggles behind what that actually means not to have access to tools. When Abigail says tools because it's just an easy way to say they don't have access to pads, tampons, menstrual cups, anything to help hold blood so that you can go along your day with your day.
They would just be free bleeding.
Yeah, free bleeding. So before we go into the struggles, I guess, so when Abigail says tools, that's what she means. She means products to manage their periods. And along with that, the education and knowledge of this is not something to be ashamed of. This is something that you should be having conversations at least with other women about. I think during your period, it's an excellent time to surround yourself with women who are going through the same thing. I know as like sitting in this room right now, we talk about periods all the time together. Yeah. We ask each other how we're doing, how we're feeling. And after doing these projects and learning about all these things, I realize now that that's probably one of the biggest blessings that we're able to do that because of what these girls go through. Before we go on to like the struggles, Abigail, I thought we could list off some stats because for people who have never actually heard about period poverty, they may be wondering, well, how many people does this actually affect?
Yeah. This is a stat from the World Bank. They found that 500 million women and girls globally lack adequate facilities and supplies for menstrual hygiene management. So that's not only what we were talking about before, the tools, but also just the restroom facilities in order to handle their period in private. And nearly 25% of all women and girls who menstruate experience period poverty. So they don't have the tools necessary to manage their periods.
Yeah, that is a lot.
25%?
That's so many.
Yeah.
This is specific to Kenya. 65% of females in Kenya are unable to afford the sanitary pads necessary for their menstrual cycle. This is specific to Kenya as well. 1 million school-age girls miss an average of 4 school days per month because of their menstrual cycle and have no access to feminine hygiene products.
That's almost a full school week.
Every single month,
Wow.
which is 12 school weeks out of the year, no?
Yeah.
Dang.
So and that's what Days for Girls shared with us whenever they said Kenya would be a good spot with Mount Elgon. They said that once girls reach puberty in the countries that they work in, they often miss, they said around 10 weeks of school each year. So this is globally in all the countries they work in, an average of 10 weeks of school each year, because they don't have appropriate washable pads. They say if girls cannot attend classes 63 days out of the year, they can't be expected to perform as well. This loss of education puts girls at a higher risk of forced child marriage and perpetuates the cycle of poverty, which is so true.
100%.
Because in a lot of these countries, women are the ones that are not running the community, but they're the ones leading the house,
Raising
they're
the
ones
children.
raising the children. And then on top of that, they continually tell us that girls grow up fearing their periods, and it's the stigmatization,
Yeah.
and they're literally excluded during their periods. So free bleeding is not an option for them. If they did free bleeding, they would be probably cast out of their villages. So they stay at home and they don't go out.
Are you
So-
saying because people think of them disgusting?
Impure, they think periods are unclean. I mean, it depends on what country you're looking at. Obviously, countries like Nepal do the whole practice of Charities, which could be a whole other podcast in and of itself, but where women are actually cast out. In Kenya, to my knowledge, or we weren't told that they were cast out, but the women just stay home. So girls don't go to school, and women just stay home. And Abigail hit on a really interesting thing that actually Oscar, who was a videographer who went on this trip with me, he was saying, of course girls can't afford, because people may be like, well, why can't they just go out and buy pads? I mean, it's not like they're living in places without some type of drugstore. These communities, even though they're extremely remote, still have small markets. But it's because they can't afford it, because the income for the household is so low. But then on top of that, and so importantly, is that the men are the ones making all the money. And if the men don't understand what happens when a woman menstruates and the fact that she needs to have something to manage it so that she can continue going to school and working, they don't add in menstrual products in the budget. And the woman doesn't feel like she can talk about, or the girl to her father doesn't feel like she can sit down and say, I need these menstrual pads so I can continue going to school. So we need to add that into the budget. And it's a budget that the family probably can't even afford in the first place, because they're selling pads for extravagant amounts compared to what the people are actually making. But the reason actually we decided to sit down and actually make this into a podcast with a microphone and everything is because when I came home, we always do these debriefs, but I normally do them with our project director, Milanita, and then they don't go anywhere. But I was sitting here having this conversation with the family, and I started talking about something that we had learned in field. And it was our first day of filming, and it was actually our very first interview, so it was kind of shocking. We were talking with this woman, Jaclyn, and she says that she's the face of the girl child, which basically means she's the woman who stands up for all of the young girls and women in her community in Mount Elgon. And she was saying that it's not just that girls have to go great lengths to make makeshift pads out of mattresses, which we can get into that. I don't want to miss that. But it's extremely common for girls now to be essentially forced into trading sex to get menstrual pads so that they can continue going to school. Which sounds crazy when I say it out loud, but that's literally what is happening. She said that the girls in these communities walk an average of 4 miles to school each day. So they wake up early in the morning and they go on their walk. And I mean, sometimes they're walking with friends, they might be walking with their siblings, but not always. And there are these motorcycles, they're called bodas, that's what they call them there. And the bodas know now that the girls need menstrual pads to go to school, or they won't go to school, and then generally they just drop out at a certain point. And so the bodas have now started stopping on the side of the road and stopping the girls and saying, listen, we know that you are either on your period or you're going to be this month. If you go and have sex with me, I'll buy you a box of pads so that you can continue going to school. And so girls at the age of because they see girls there starting their periods around 9, 10, and then obviously there are girls starting their periods at 13, 14. But girls will go and literally have sex with men so that they can have a box of pads so that they can go to school, which was insane.
It's horrible.
It is. And I knew that they were doing things like using mattresses to help them, the foam for mattresses, but I had no idea that they were literally being stopped by men and what do you call it? It's like using something that they know that a girl needs so badly to get something for themselves.
Is that blackmail?
Blackmail thing.
Yeah, blackmailing the girls into it.
They're getting preyed upon.
Mm-hmm.
I would fear, if I was in that situation, fear getting my period every single month.
Yeah.
No wonder they look at periods so negatively. I mean, that's horrible.
True. No wonder it's not an open conversation. Because honestly, the conversation would go like, yeah, I got my period last month and I went and had sex with a man I didn't want to have sex with.
Which is basically rape.
Yeah, it is. So there's a word for it, no?
It's coercion.
Coerced rape.
Yeah.
Over a box of pads. It's one thing learning that girls don't have access to pads and don't have access to something to manage their periods, and then it's a whole other thing for them to not be able to go to school and to end up being married off at 12, 13 or get pregnant. But then it's like a whole other thing for something that's so natural for a woman to happen. It happens every single month, for them to literally be getting raped so that they can manage it.
That's a new level of
Yeah.
atrocity, really.
Yeah.
And you're not able to talk to anybody about it.
Well, and talk about the cycle, because then they become pregnant at a young age. And
Right. So then what happens is, because the girls are on their periods, they can have babies. And so the bodas will stop and have sex with them, but it's not like they're using condoms, and the girls are obviously not on birth control. And so the girls end up getting pregnant. And then the girls aren't in school. The girls drop out of school. They stay at home, they have kids, and then they're moms by an extremely young age. And it's just like a cycle all over again. Then that mom has kids. She probably has a lot of stuff that she's dealing with personally. And it's not like she's going to have open conversations with her kids about it. And so then her daughters go through the same thing over again.
Which is period poverty. That is
Period
part
poverty.
of it. Right?
Yeah. I said to Oscar, the videographer, I was like, I really, really would love it if one of the places that we visited after the distribution, because what Days for Girls will do is they'll go into schools and into villages and they'll gather all of the women and girls, and they will give them a menstrual health presentation, basically, with graphics and everything. It's actually a really fun presentation. They're very happy and it's lighthearted for the girls. So they'll explain to them that periods are very normal. This could take anywhere, I would say, around 35 to 40 minutes. The girls ask questions, and then they show them the menstrual kits that have the liners and the pads and underwear in them, and they even show them how to put the pad on the underwear and how to clean it and the whole thing. And I said I would love it if we could get a group of friends together and them have an open conversation about their periods on camera. Just like you and me and Georgia Scott were sitting down and having a conversation like we do basically every single month about our period. But thankfully we were able to get Daisy and her two friends, and they sat down and talked, and they were talking in Swahili, so I wasn't understanding, but our translator was translating it. After they would talk for a few minutes, she would say what they were saying. And she was saying that she had never seen it happen before, that three girls actually sat and had it was like a 15-minute conversation about their periods together. And that she was shocked, number one, that this was actually happening. And Booyah is from Kenya and has been working with Days for Girls, I think, for 3 years. And she said that the girls were giving telling their experiences of how they started their period together, and like they were sharing their experience. And one of the girls said, I started my period and none of my friends had started theirs yet, so I didn't know what it was. And I didn't tell anybody in my family or my mom. And so I just went into my bedroom and I cut up my mattress and I just used the foam or whatever from the mattress, and that's how I managed my first period. And I don't know, we haven't translated the entire thing. That's how she managed her first period, and that's how she continued going to school. Which is what we had heard before we went on these trips, that girls will use anything. They'll use dirty rags that they can get a hold of around the house. Even in some countries, they'll use animal fat, which I have yet to actually meet someone who said that that is what they've used, but we've read it, which obviously leads to so many infections and issues. They'll use mattresses, and then obviously there are some that just don't use anything and they just stay at home and just stop whatever they're doing. But this was like I was sitting there watching these three girls talk, and they were, how old was Daisy? Yeah, Daisy was 12, and we talked with her friend Sylvia, who was 13, and her friend Brenda, who was 13. I was sitting there listening to these girls talk, who were 10 years younger than me, about problems that I've never faced and never had and probably will never have. And just something like a period, again, that a woman gets every single month, that is completely natural, I had never thought of. Just never crossed my mind that that would be an issue for girls. And an issue that's literally making their lives change. Not for the better.
Did they talk about why they don't feel comfortable having conversations about it with their family, their mother and their sisters?
The moms and sisters don't have conversations with them about it. It's just not talked about. They don't talk about it with their friends. I mean, there's no way that they're going to be having them with their mom. Especially when their mom didn't have a conversation with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
That's why a lot of the time, Days for Girls is not going into these communities and just teaching the girls. They have the moms sitting down if they're willing. They have a whole other program called Men Who Know, which is where they bring in the men and the boys. Actually, at the last school that we went to, the girls and the boys were sitting right beside each other. And before they started the girls thing, a man went up and did a whole thing about men's health and showed them how this all functions and how to not use it. And I mean, they even have a whole program over what it means when a girl says no.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. Thankfully, there are people out there that are coming up with, that are, actively trying to change the way that people perceive women getting their periods and how they can manage it. But I still think there's a lot of work to do. Days for Girls would be the first to tell you that there's a lot of breaking down. Should girls be able to stay in school when they get their periods? Absolutely yes.
Yeah.
Should they feel belittled, ashamed, unclean impure when they have their periods? Absolutely no. And should they be forced to have sex so that they can go into their local market and buy a box of pads so that they can continue going to school? No. That is wrong.
You may want to hit on that more because of like that comment where people are like, you shouldn't change these people's customs. Maybe talk about that more, that like girls, everyone gets these. Nobody should be thought of as unpure just because of their period.
Just talking about how people right now are so mad about people going in fields and going and doing these trips and changing people's cultures.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely organizations and there are definitely people that go into these countries, and it doesn't matter if it's dealing with menstrual health or if it's dealing with giving clean water or bringing food or disaster relief, you name it, and there's organizations and people that have butchered the way that things have been done. And they've ruined communities, and in fact, I think that they've ruined countries because of it. I say they put a Band-Aid on something that needed surgery. It's temporary fix. So a temporary fix for something like this would be a group of people walk into a country or into a community and they bring, 800 boxes of, let's say they bring, because somebody would do this. And I'm not saying that the way that Mite does it is perfect or the partners that we work with are perfect, but they definitely think things through. And I can totally see an organization walking in and bringing like 300 boxes of pads and 500 boxes of tampons. And they go in and they're like, okay, we know that girls have their periods every month and they're dropping out of school, so we need to go in and help. So they go in and they start like passing out these pads and tampons. Well, problem one is a box of pads is going to last girls. You can give those, 300 boxes out to 300 girls, and it's going to last them a single month.
Yeah.
And next month, those girls would be tracked down by the bodas and coerced to have sex so that they can buy another box of pads. And problem two is the girls in these countries don't use tampons. So yes, people go in and instead of doing appropriate research on the country and working solely with people that are from the country and literally from the community. That's why our first interview was with a woman who she said born and bred in Mount Elgon. She knows it, it's part of her. If you're not working with those people, you're not going to learn things like the girls don't use tampons. But it's a very important point. It's that whole book of When Helping Hurts. People constantly go into countries and want to do good. I think a lot of people go in with a pure heart, but in the end, they literally end up hurting the people that they're helping more than if they would have just never gone into the country. So that's why what I was saying yesterday, because somebody asked, like, well, how does this help the girls long term? This specific program that we did helps the girls long term because the girls can use these pads for years and years. If they appropriately wash and take care of them, hang them out to dry, they say always in the sun because the sun kills bacteria. They can use the pads for years and years, all the way through school. And the whole side of the education is so important because the girls then now realize this is not something that happens to me every year or every month that I should be ashamed of. This is something natural. When we were in Nepal, one of the girls that we interviewed said, I'm going to take what I learned just now in the classroom and I'm going to bring it back to my mom and my grandma who live with me. And I'm going to tell them about it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have it moving through a community. It's like those ripple effects that we talk about. It's so important. If you just give a girl, even if Days for Girls just went out and gave girls these menstrual kits but said nothing else, how does that help in the end? The girls still feel ashamed when they're on their period. They still don't know what it means when they have it. And they probably don't even know how to use the pads. So we finished that project, and that is what it was like. We helped with the entire program in Mount Elgon, so not just development of the menstrual kits, but we also helped 2 women run small businesses who will continually develop the menstrual kits year over year.
So good.
and we helped with their whole training of local leaders. So people in the government, people like Jackie, which we interviewed at the very beginning, which is the face of the girl child for Mount Elgon. We are very grateful for what Days for Girls is doing, and they've really opened up my eyes, and I think I'd say even, our donors' eyes. Everybody that I've talked to didn't realize that was the problem for so many girls. And I think that we'll probably say this in many of our podcasts, but I do just want to say this. Obviously, we have a lot to learn, and we do our best going in these countries and being extremely respectful of the way that they have done things for years and years. And so we are open to people's thoughts and feedback, but obviously please be nice to us. We realize that we are not living day in and day out in the places that we work with our partners on. So we are just trying to do our best to raise awareness of what's going on, things that we're learning ourselves, and obviously be able to spread the mission of our partners that we're supporting and our donors are, and the stories that we hear when we're in field. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Abigail, Georgia, and Mama, for sitting down and debriefing it with me.
Peace.
Peace.